I know that I did a lot of thinking about the challenges before us, as I'm sure you did over the weekend. We have also heard a lot from the public, and it appears that we'll hear more tonight, which is wonderful. I hope that will continue. It's great to get feedback from the community about the budget that's before us. As I thought about this weekend, I think we have some really quite fundamental kind of threshold questions before us that make our process challenging. And so I wanted to throw something out for people to chew on as we listen to the public. Maybe some public members of the public would even like to weigh in. But we have last year we had more time, and all we really needed to do, not all we needed to do, but we still had a significant job, but we had a series of cuts in front of us, and we needed to go through those and make some trade-offs and some decisions about those. This year we also have some, I think, kind of framework questions around the use of reserves, around the use of one-time funds for ongoing funding, that kind of thing. And if so, what types of one-time funding would we use? If we are going to use one-time funding, what's going to be different in 18 months that's not going to bring us to a point of having to do the same thing again, et cetera, and what would be the trade-offs? And so obviously these questions are pretty critical to our ability to then look at the city manager's recommendation and evaluate it. So we also have, as you know, a very limited amount of time. We have a meeting tonight, we have a meeting Thursday, and right now we're scheduled for 2 meetings next week. We want to hear as much as we can from the community, and we also need to have some pretty significant conversations. So therefore, I wanted to throw out an idea, a possibility that I'd like the committee to discuss when we come back to discussion later, and that is this. So, and I've talked briefly to a couple other people about this, but I'd like to have the whole committee's input when we come back to discussion. And that is the possibility of us using some one-time funds that are coming available, potentially some of them soon, such as our PERS savings, such as potential $800,000 from the sale of the property to the shed, maybe looking at a little bit of money from the UEFB, and saying, can we fund these services that are on this list for the next 6 months while we extend our process so that we can do some more due diligence and really go deeper into some of these questions, such that we can say in 6 months, if we do not have, otherwise in 6 months we'll go with the city manager's recommendation, but we have some additional time to really do the work that we need to do to discuss these kind of fundamental questions, as well as to look at some of the items that are in the city manager's proposed budget. Obviously, there would be some logistical questions there we'd need to figure out, and we can talk about those, but it would give us a lot more time, and it would give us the opportunity to, I think, do some more due diligence. So there are definitely some challenges with it, but I wanted to throw it out as something for us to at least discuss, and I'm happy or if someone else can make a motion around that when we come back to the table. So just wanted to throw that out for discussion. Just a couple announcements. Councilor Clark is absent tonight, and citizen member Marty Wilde is also absent tonight. And finally, there's been a staff motion to adjourn at 7:15 so that we can allow for transition to council meeting, which is in the same room at 7:30. So with that, oh yes, Mark wanted 10 seconds, and then we will open up to
I
the
just
public.
wanted to acknowledge on a much lighter note that today is Laura's birthday, and so how dedicated of a chair we have for her to be here tonight on our birthday. So happy birthday.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you. I was just glad that I got to talk to the Register Guard reporter when I was still 43. That was nice.
Our present will be, we won't sing to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That is a very kind present. I'd like to open this up to public comment and testimony. We have a lot of people here tonight. We did increase our public comment period from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Given the number of people that are here, I'm going to ask, first of all, that we're probably going to take these down to 2 minutes each tonight. Anybody who does not get heard, we are going to extend the comment period on Thursday because we do want to hear from as many people as possible. And finally, to the extent that you can, and I know this is very difficult to do, but to the extent that you're here with a group of people, many of whom are speaking to the same issue, if you can try to consolidate your remarks behind 1 or 2 people and then kind of stand or raise your hands or somehow show us the number of people who are here representing that same issue, that will allow us to hear from as many people about as many different issues as possible. I know that's a challenge logistically, but to the extent that you can do it, that would be great. So, okay. So the first, and you can, whoever is going to speak can just come right up here to this table. Our first person is Christine Enking. Christine?
Good evening, afternoon. My name is Christine N. King, and I work for Women's Space. I'm here to try and bring attention to the impact budget cuts from the City of Eugene would have on survivors of intimate partner violence and their children. My hope is that my comments and the comments from other human service organizations are given due consideration when your decisions are made. As the primary provider of survivor services and given our current capacity, Women's Space can only serve a fraction of the survivors and their children at this time. The proposed budget cuts would further erode our provision of core services, and the people who will pay are the survivors and their children. To give you a context to understand the impact of domestic violence and what it would have on our community, let's look at the population, which in 2011 was a little over 157,000 in the City of Eugene. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience some form of domestic violence in their lifetime. That is approximately 30,000 women, children, and men in the City of Eugene. Now keep that number in mind. The emergency shelter for survivors of intimate partner violence, we can serve at one given time 22. That's it. And the shelter is the one that's going to be affected the most. It's been in our community for close to 40 years and has been providing safety, advocacy, and case management to our shelter residents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for all of those years. If the proposed budget cuts are passed, we will need to reduce our staff coverage at the shelter to where we essentially become caretakers on site rather than the survivor advocates our residents need. We triage survivors for the shelter and take in survivors that have the highest needs and are in the most danger from their abusers. This is a time of crisis for them and a time when support and advocacy are needed the most.
Thank you very much, Christine. The next commentator is Kirsten Lee.
Good evening. My name is Kirsten Lee, and I'm the Director of Runaway and Homeless Youth Services for Looking Glass. And so that means I oversee 3 programs, the Rural Program in Cottage Grove. But I'm here to speak tonight in regards to the Eugene programs of New Roads Day Access Center, and it has a street outreach component, and Station 7, the emergency shelter for homeless and runaway youth. Looking Glass has had to face the tough reality of what these impending cuts will do to our current services. While we are not closing any service, we are forced to reduce the services that we are offering. Station 7 will reduce to 16 hours a day from 24 hours, and the program faces a 50% reduction in available beds. New Roads will reduce the number of nights we are open by 50%, discontinue its sexual assault and exploitation education program, and cut a shift from the street outreach team. The numbers speak for themselves. That is 3,000 less meals served to homeless youth. That is the potential of 2,000 less crisis calls being answered each year. People in need throughout the area will not be linked into crucial services that they need to keep them stable. Case management at Station 7 will be gone. A homeless school liaison said last week at a meeting that by the time Station 7 opens up for the day, she'll be going home for the day. So homeless students will not get connected to basic needs and other emergency services that they need to help them with their education. These programs are not only facing local cuts, we've been cut at the state and the federal level. There's nothing left to cut except our FTE and our services. It is said for every $1 spent on runaway and homeless services, it saves the city and county approximately $7. That's for every $1 spent with Looking Glass. We are helping connect young people to medical services. They're out of emergency rooms. We're helping connect them to housing services. And we're helping ensure that they get the help that they need. So I'm asking you on behalf of Looking Glass and other Human Service Network providers, please reconsider the cuts. Thank you.
And next, Judy Adamczyk. Judy?
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Judy Adamczyk, and I'm here to advocate for Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels receives approximately $27,000 through Human Services, and if they do not get the money for Human Services, this will be cut. Meals on Wheels without the city's investment. A community is judged by how it handles the least of its citizens. These seniors have contributed to the community over their lifetime, and they expect very little in return. But food insecurity should not be a problem for seniors, young people, or Food for Lane County, for example, that's a second-tier fallback for people who need food subsistence. I've been a volunteer packing Meals on Wheels for 6 years. In that time, I've seen the rolls reduced from 290 hot meals to 205 meals last week. Due to the sequester, clients have been taken off the rolls, waiting lists established, the number of hot meals served decreased, as well as weekend meals being eliminated. For many, this is the only meal they have in the entire day. Meals on Wheels is the one program that enables 92% of participants to continue to live in their own homes. It allows people to live out their lives in dignity and self-reliance, two key elements of our existence and our definition of self-worth. They should not have to choose between eating and medicine, but a lot of them have to do that. I'm sure you've all heard the statistics. While Meals on Wheels costs $1,960 per client per year, the cost for Medicaid nursing home care would be $57,878 per person. The emergency room costs for a malnutrition senior is $1,853 a day, for which the taxpayer is footing the bill. 50% of all diseases and chronic health conditions impacting seniors are directly connected to insufficient nutrient intake and food insecurity. But these numbers, don't forget, these numbers represent people. These are shut-in, folks who can't do on their own without assistance.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. Thank you very much for your testimony tonight.
I would challenge you to drive with our drivers for one delivery and tell us who does not deserve to eat.
Thank you. So next we have Tim Kling, followed by Pat Farr.
Got my own timer. I can't see that far. My name is Tim Kling. I'm here to advocate for keeping the Sheldon Pool open. There is a big, vast, and wonderful swimming community that exists within our Eugene community. As you know, we have 3 pools in this community: Amazon, Sheldon, and Echo Hollow. They're used by a number of different groups. One of the groups is swim clubs. There are several of them. The one my son belongs to happens to have 175 kids that range in age from 5 to 18. A good number of them are on financial assistance because their parents cannot afford the dues, and that financial assistance is 100% funded by the club itself. These various clubs host meets, a dozen meets that attract anywhere from 500 to 1,000 kids that come in from Portland, Medford for long weekends, and they bring their parents. Other groups that use it: high school water polo teams, swim teams. There's just numerous swimming lessons that are given in these pools. Lap swimmers, which are mostly adults. Water aerobics, which tend to be older adults. The skin divers hold their lessons in this. And then there's just the rec swimmers that are adults and kids that just jump in the pool for the fun of it to swim. And as you know, there is a program out there for the homeless to get showers at these pools. And a lot of times these pools, these functions, these groups are in the pools at the same time. These pools are multitasking out there. Most of these groups I've mentioned pay rent. These pools are, and every one of them wants more time. These pools are at capacity. Just to demonstrate how big and vast and passionate this group is, first of all, you probably can't see a lot of them, but the people in the sidewalk are here to support that. And then I would mention everyone in this room who is here to support the continuation of the Sheldon Pool Open. Would you please stand and raise your hand? Okay. You know what, the Budget Committee and the City Council, if you're not part of this community, if you're not part of it already, we'd invite you to get out, jump in the pool, swim a few laps. You know, you're going to find some wonderful, passionate, and diverse people. You'll be in better shape, and I guarantee you, you will sleep better at night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. Next we have Pat Farr, followed by Peggy Whalen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Committee. My name is Pat Farr. I live at 1929 President Street in Eugene, 97402. I'm here as a member of the Eugene Human Rights Commission and, Human Services Commission. Always got the two mixed up. I'm also here as at the request of the CAAC, the Community Action Advisory Committee, to talk about human services. The Lane County Intergovernmental Human Services Commission is the agency that uses money given by the cities of Springfield and Eugene and Lane County to leverage large amounts of federal and state grant money in order to provide the broad array of services offered in our community. The city of Eugene has always demonstrated leadership in support of the Human Services Commission. I could talk for a long time about how strongly members of the Eugene City Council and the Budget Committee have historically been committed to committing basic support for the children, men, women, and families who sometimes chronically and sometimes just temporarily are least able to take care of their own needs. Helping our neighbors who find themselves at the greatest risk of missing meals, being unsheltered, or receiving less essential health services than required. I don't believe that personal level of understanding and caring has evaporated from any one person on this committee. However, what's in imminent danger of going away is a fiscal commitment that's always been present here, year after year. A commitment of leadership that has locally compelled other jurisdictions to step up to the plate and at least try to match what we've always done in Eugene. Every year, I've heard, and usually been a part of the responses, as a larger city with greater resources, Eugene is better able to support the services. But every year at the Budget Committee, I also hear, why is it Eugene that puts the money forward? Why does nobody else put the money forward? Well, people say that Eugene has more money to put forward. That's not really the truth. People say that perhaps because the services exist in Eugene and no place else. That's not really the truth. It's because of the caring of the people, the men and women that have historically served on this committee. Lots to say. I'll leave this testimony, but I'm just going to say, keep in the leadership position that you've always been in. Fund the Human Services Commission. Thank you.
Next, we have Peggy Whalen, followed by Jim Cheney.
My name is Peggy Whalen, the Executive Director of Women's Space. I'm here speaking not on behalf of Women's Space, but all of the agencies represented by the Human Services Network. The impact of these proposed cuts to the human services in our community will be devastating. We all work so incredibly close and rely on one another to serve the families in Eugene. We've built a closely knit fabric that is helping to hold up the members of our community that need it the most. We've all suffered so many cuts that many vital services in our community have closed entirely or have been so greatly reduced that they are no longer meeting the needs. Sorry. Who does this impact? It could be the 50-year-old homeless woman staying at the Mission who found a job in Montana with room and board, but she didn't have money for bus fare, so Catholic Community Services got a church to do that for her, and now she has an opportunity for a better life. It could be the woman at Women's Space who was involved with DHS and recently had a new baby, and they said that they would only allow her to keep her baby if she had was able to stay in her shelter with 24-hour staffing, which is going to go away, so she would have lost her child. Those are some examples of people directly impacted. This decision should not be made without remembering the numerous cuts we've all experienced from every source of funding, state, federal, county, donors. It's truly been death by 1,000 cuts. The strength of a community is measured by how it treats those who are the most needy and vulnerable. What does it say about our community if we make these cuts? We need to keep our community safe and healthy. I urge you to fund the Human Services Commission that supports all these vital services. They're out here in our community. And just a show of hands, I know they're in other places, but we help the most needy people in our community. And so we really need you to remember us.
Thank you. Next, we have Jim Cheney, followed by Jillian Cherish. Jim Cheney here? No? Okay. Jillian Cherish, followed by Monica Wilton.
I'm Jillian Cherish, and I'm a city employee, but I'm here to speak as a citizen. Of the many reasons I've heard to vote against this city fee, none of them were because the services provided weren't valued by our voters. I am so discouraged that such a sloppy request was put forward, but the vote's done. Because the cost of starting from scratch is so high, I fear that any doors we close will be a final end to these services. The Bethel branch serves what I feel is the most isolated and neglected corner of our city, And I would ask that for this year, we use whatever funds that we might to maintain the library service there while we design a levy that our community can trust in and vote for. Thanks for your time. And is it okay if I sneak out behind so there's room for more folks to come in?
Very much.
All right, thanks.
Monica Wilton, followed by Brenda Nolte.
I'm Monica Wilton. I'm the Executive Director of the Eugene Public Library Foundation, and I'm here to advocate for the library. Of course, the cost to cutting services again this year would be the closure of 2 branches plus 1 day in the downtown branch. And many of you who are library users will already know what I'm going to say. If you are not a library user, I'd like you to consider the universality of the library. We see every single demographic from our city. We see them every day. We see the homeless, the impoverished, the wealthy, the babies, the children, the educated, the teens, the elderly. Every socioeconomic, ethnic, and gender diversity group we see in the library. They all come looking for personal growth and fulfillment. But what truly matters, in addition to the information they receive, is that they all feel safe, hopeful, welcomed, and included in the dream and possibilities of their lives, and there are thousands every day. The library holds the heartbeat of our community. I wonder if your picture of the library includes people that have come to work with staff who will work on writing resumes and do online job searches and find jobs, because our dedicated library staff is second to none. They are amazing. They are dedicated to our community. But here I am advocating for the library when there are so many other amazing services, and you are smart people and you know what's at stake. And interestingly enough, in my humble approach to trying to help, I was actually going to suggest exactly what Lori suggested. I would ask that you give this process 6 months from the reserves, that will not completely use them up, but will give this group a chance to work. Call me, I'll help you any way I can. Please preserve these services in our library as well as everything else our people depend on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Brenda Nolte, followed by Paul Keppo.
Hello, my name is Brenda Nolte, and I'm speaking about Sheldon Pool. I'm a mother of 2 children, both who have taken swim lessons at Sheldon Pool since they were infants. I will make 3 points of why I believe the Sheldon Pool should stay open. Number 1, to provide continued water safety programs for our youth, our adults, and our elderly in our community. Number 2, as a community event center, providing low-cost means of exercise and water playtime. Number 3, because my 11-year-old loves her swim team. Number 1, providing swim lessons. As a parent, it is very difficult in our city to provide to have access to swim lessons with the current number of swimming pools that we have currently. It's a challenge as a working parent to find enough time after work to get our kids programs. One of the things that I'm concerned about as a parent are all the water hazards that surround our city. We have lakes, we have streams, even Mount Pisgah is a water hazard. I'm not asking that kids swim in Willamette River. I'm asking that kids know what's safe, what parents know what's safe, and what to do if in case there's an emergency. Number 2, the community center is a huge portion of what the Sheldon Pool provides. It is more than just for our swim team. It is also for community functions, such as recently they had an event last Friday night that involved swimming and movie nights and fun activities for both the elderly and the youth. Number 3, for the love. We have a really wonderful swim team that encompasses children who are quite good at swimming to children who are quite young and trying really hard at this sport. It is for all levels, and it is something that, as a team, we would really hope to consider keeping our pool open. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Keppo, followed by Jeffrey Winter.
As you can see from my shirt, I'm a Team Eugene parent, but I speak not really for Team Eugene or for Sheldon Pool, but for all of these services. I feel that the mindset behind these cuts is short-sighted. It's sort of a mindset of scarcity. Our tax revenue right now is at an nadir from the effects of the Great Recession. I understand that. But the economy as a whole in the nation is on a rebound. Just today in the New York Times, it was reported that home prices rose 11% nationally over the last year. That's the biggest annual increase since April of 2006. The stock market's at all-time highs. Consumer sentiment is improving. Just today as well, the Consumer Conference Board reported that the Consumer Confidence Index rose in May to its highest level since February of 2008, which is when the recession started. But if we want Eugene to be part of this recovery, we cannot approach funding our basic community services from a mindset of scarcity. All of these services that we're talking about are so essential to attract business and people to our community. We must show some optimism and faith that we too will follow the national trends and that our tax basis will soon be growing. Nationally, we have been in a budgetary debate of stimulus spending versus deficit reduction. This debate seems to me to be very similar. We must maintain our community if we want it to grow and prosper. We cannot allow ourselves to have a mindset of scarcity. I ask you to please find a way to maintain our city services. 6 months would be great. I would like to see it until the next budget cycle. And trust that with this investment, Eugene will follow our state and the nation's recovery from this horrible recession that we've all lived through.
Thank you very much. Great speakers tonight. If you could please hold your applause, it would be great. It will help us hear from as many people as possible. Thank you very much. Next, we have Jeffrey Winter, followed by John Borofsky. Borofsky? Borofsky.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jeffrey Winter. I'm a resident of South Eugene. I'm obviously a member of Team Eugene, and I'm a Team Eugene board member. So a few facts concerning Sheldon Pool. Currently, 65% of the team uses Sheldon Pool as their primary place for their training and workouts. So the closure of Sheldon would put essentially majority of the 175 swimmers out of a pool the majority of the year. Many of these swimmers are actually in the senior squad. That some of them swim at other pools, Echo, the Y occasionally. But many of these swimmers have been recruited by colleges to swim for them. Some of these colleges, the swimmers have been recruited by Pomona, Swarthmore, MIT, Whitworth, Arizona State, and many others. So if Sheldon Pool closes, essentially, there's no other options. They have to push another swim team out of the water, or we have to find some other place to swim, and there really isn't other spots to do that. We're already turning away swimmers because of the lack of swim space from our squad. We could put other people in the water, but there's not enough water to put them in. Number two. So I know you're not going to like to hear this point, and you probably already noodled on it, but last year, in the last budget, $750,000 was spent on the Sheldon upgrade. Now, the Sheldon Pool upgrade, and it was closed for most of the summer, all the summer actually. Now, as a finance professional, I understand that we're supposed to consider that as sunk costs. However,
thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
John Borofsky, followed by Bonnie Bettman McCornack.
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm not here to advocate for anything. I just would like to bring up some points. I've emailed these to you electronically. These are questions that I would ask if I were sitting at the table that I think may help you to form opinions on the budget ahead of you. The first is, it would be helpful to have a breakdown of the $800,000 of the equity, human rights, and neighborhoods so that if there is an attempt to fund them, you'll know how much each one needs. Second is, at the last supplemental budget in December, there was $275,000 that was allocated to the Downtown Urban Renewal Agency, a very restrictive type of a fund. I'd like to, if I were there, I'd like to know how much of that is left, and is that able to be appropriated back into the general fund. Third, there is a $1 million reserve for tax appeals. I would like a little bit more of a explanation of that, why it's been on the books for this will be the fourth budget cycle, and is that available for some one-time uses. Fourth, unfilled vacancies. If any of the cuts that are being made are made to a position that is unfilled or has been unfilled for some period of time, that may help you decide which of these cuts need to be made. If there's a position that's been unfilled for a year, it may be easier to cut that than one that perhaps may not be unfilled. And then lastly, it is the idea of one-time monies against ongoing revenues. It appears from my reading of the budget that the city manager has put that forward. A third of the reserve for revenue shortfall is going away. To me, that's one-time money that's going for ongoing revenues. I'd like to know where he's planning on spending that. You have these there. Thank you for your hard work.
Very much. Thanks, John. Bonnie Bettman McCornack, followed by Yasuyo Kamata.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I submitted much more extensive comments online. I hope you have received those, and I hope you have read them. The circumstances of these budget hearings are unfortunate because the process is broken. Traditionally, Eugene's budget process covered multiple meetings, hearings, and presentations from department heads with detailed budget information available from each department and opportunities for budget members to explore those budgets. Salem's Budget Committee had 9 meetings from January 16th through May 8th, with extensive presentations of specific budgets and adequate time for members to question expenditures and deliberate. Eugene's process is devoid of substance, and the manager is acting as a bottleneck for the meager information he allows you to have access to. It is impossible for the members of the public to review how their money is being spent, and it is impossible for you, as our fiduciary agents, to actively provide checks and balances to this administration and serve the public's interests. This process needs to be fixed, and hopefully you will use your authority to restore an accountable budget process over the next months. In the meantime, yes, please, recapture the City Hall Replacement Fund 323 and the Facility Reserve Fund 614 and any other fund with City Hall rebuild money in it, and use that money to pay for essential services that are on the manager's cut list. A stripped-down City Hall is not a higher priority than the services on the cut list. You've also got usually between $4.5 and $5.5 million of unanticipated revenue that always shows up in December that you can spend. If you can afford to take money out of the general fund for City Hall, if you can afford to subsidize private developers, you can afford to fund these services this year and every year.
Yasuyo Kamata, followed by Sabrina Parsons.
Hi, my name is Yasuyo Kamata. I'm a mother of 3 children. They all using my Sheldon pool, and I would like to not closing Sheldon pool. Because of that is swimming is very good for the exercising, and then kids can get the more energy to do academically very well and also socializing very well. And these days, school cuts the budget for the PE, so my kids has no PE exercising during the school except for the recess. So if we cut the swimming pools, accessibility, it's very little amount of the exercise for the kids. So I wish you can reconsider about that.
Thank you very much. Sabrina Parsons, followed by Andrew Fisher.
Thank you. I appreciate your guys' time. As a member of the 4J Budget Committee, I know it's a difficult task that you guys have. I'm here in support of Sheldon Pool, like many other Team Eugene members, and I'll try to be quick. I understand you have a lot of difficult cuts, but I do think that the fact that the 4J school system is going through so many cuts as well, and there is no PE in school, is something to very much keep in mind. A place where kids can go to be active, both community members and swim team members, is a really important piece of our city. As a business owner and someone who is actively has 6 open positions, I have to sell Eugene to people who might be coming in from out of town, as do other businesses that are trying to hire, as well as I know that there are efforts to bring businesses into town, and we don't want to be one of those cities that just doesn't have these basic services, that there is no pool to go to in the winter, that there is no swim team. 2 of my sons are on the swim team. We go to meets all over Oregon, and Team Eugene represents Eugene. There are teams from Roseburg, Newport, North Bend, Bend, all over Oregon, and for us to not have Sheldon Pool may mean that Eugene is not represented. And so at all these meets where all these other towns have teams, Eugene won't have a team, and it will be yet another thing that someone looking at Eugene to move their company or to take a position is going to look at and say, wow, they don't even have a pool for a swim team. Obviously, it'll affect high school swim teams as well. So I really do think from a community perspective, from the fact that 4J school doesn't have money for PE, that to cut a facility like this may be short-sighted. And then to follow up on a previous point about the $750,000 that was already invested, clearly it's a sunk cost, but it's also a cost that you all thought was worth making. So I would just leave it at that. Thank you.
Andrew Fisher, followed by Howie Bonnet.
Hello, my name is Andrew Fisher. I volunteer on the Friendly Area Neighbors Board and have for the past 5 years, and I also edit our neighborhood newsletter, and I'm here to urge the Budget Committee tonight to maintain funding for neighborhood services. Neighborhood newsletters are produced by volunteers and are mailed to every physical address in the neighborhood typically. And in my neighborhood in Fan, we have about 7,000 residents, and many of them don't get the daily paper. They might not have a computer, they might not have internet. And so these neighborhood newsletters and publications are a primary source of information for some residents on issues that are affecting the quality of life. And I just want to strongly encourage the Budget Committee to reflect on all the productive and meaningful work that comes out of neighborhood associations and the volunteers who donate their time and expertise to improve the quality of life for everyone in the community. And I believe that our neighborhood publications are crucial to cultivating constructive neighborhood dialogue and building and maintaining our community partnerships. Please maintain funding for neighborhood services.
Thank you. Howie Bonnet, followed by William Wise.
Thank you. My name is Howie Bonnet. I live at 1835 East 28th Street, and tonight I'm not here to argue for any specific services or their preservations, and I'm not representing anybody. But I am alumnus of the organization as a lay member, chair, and I actually like the chair's suggestions in this case quite a bit. I just want to point out a few things. I hope you can read this at some time at your leisure. I do feel that I need to say that the city is at a point, and you are at a point, where you really need to be very careful, because I believe there's a high level of dissatisfaction in the community, and that dissatisfaction is focused on the handling and the use of reserve funds. It's focused on the specific selection of services to be cut, and it's focused on the fact that a bond measure submitted was so flawed that it caused the first division in my household and how the two of us voted in 40 years of living in Eugene. So I think what I recommended in this memo to you is pretty precisely what the chair suggested, because the time is too short for you to really go through the budget in the way that it needs to be gone through at this point. I think you need solution C, as several of you mentioned last time. You need to look at the services one by one. For example, I do not see the Riverfront Research Park on this list of services. And I would like you to ask, each of you, if that is more important a service than the ones on management.
So William Wise, followed by Mike Barnaby, and then we're going to take a time check at that point.
My name is William Wise. I live at 508 Landgers Lane in Eugene. I'm the director of St. Vincent de Paul's First Place Family Center. I want to start by thanking the city for their current support for the overnight car camping program and First Place's triage referral coordinator, not to mention the city's close association and support for St. Vincent de Paul's programs over the years. We do want to ask whether or not the city's expansion of homeless services at First Place and the car camping program that came about last January are part of the suggested reductions in human services funding. I want to add my voice to those who are asking you to continue to support the vital services for those in the community who are struggling for survival. Speaking specifically for First Place Family Center, it's my hope that you will be able to find a way for us to continue to provide for the basic needs of the hundreds of families with children who rely on the center. If the human services cuts are not mitigated to some degree, then we'll experience radical cuts in services provided. The most obvious thing will be the fact that we'll need to close this summer and perhaps ongoing on the weekends. That will mean families with children will have no place to eat, shower, go to the bathroom, etc. It's a hard job you've got. I trust you to do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike Barnaby? Thank you.
Good evening, councilors, budget committee members, City Manager Reese, and Mayor Piercy. My name is Mike Barnaby. I'm a resident of the City of Eugene as well as a captain with the Eugene Fire Department. I'm also the president of Eugene Firefighters Association Local 851. I come before you tonight to urge you to locate the funding to keep the fire department and its firefighter paramedics at its current staffing level. When asked in a survey by Dr. Manross regarding the city services the public most wanted to see maintained, 96% of the citizens polled prioritized the current fire department staffing as the number one or number two in importance. Since 1981, the demand for services and calls from the citizens of Eugene have increased 700%. The population of the city has increased 60%, and the fire department now responds into the incorporated areas of Santa Clara. Even though the calls have become more technical and labor intensive, the fire department has not had a significant increase in staffing. We are working at a staffing level that was barely adequate from 30 years ago. Removing firefighter paramedics from the geographical center of the city of Eugene will shift call volume and needs of the community to the other engine companies in the emergency system. This added burden will cause delays in response to the other parts of the city, increasing the response times community-wide. As discovered at last year's Ambulance Transport Summit, the fire department is in need of more resources, not less. The entire EMS system is predicated on paramedics, on the fire engines arriving first and initiating emergency care for the patients. The loss of Engine 2 and its firefighter paramedics will cause a delay of that essential first arriving medical care, risking the safety of the citizens. The men and women of the fire department have a proud history of serving our community. We are there for you when you ask for us and when you need us. Regardless of the time of day, of time of night, the citizens deserve a prompt response from their first responders. The fire department, however, cannot adequately respond to the needs of the community without maintaining the minimum staffing. I ask you to look at the budget once more and locate the funds for the fire department that they need to maintain the staffing required to keep our community and its citizens safe. Thank you.
Thank you. So that officially concludes our period tonight for public comment. So we have a challenge tonight because we have to end at 7:15. So we want to have time for the city manager to be able to present about some of the facility reserve funds. So unless there's a motion for us to continue, I think we will instead open up for additional comment on Thursday evening so that we can have the people who were not heard tonight. And I don't know if there's a way for those people to be prioritized on Thursday. Is that possible? And then if otherwise, we'll open that up for more on Thursday. I'm sorry, Councilor Brown, did you have?
No, go ahead. I was going to say they could give testimony at the council meeting, but all you guys will probably be gone.
Right, we would probably be gone. So is there a question from? I'm sorry?
They can write it in.
Yeah, we would have to ask you to write it in unless there's a motion to continue. Yes.
How many
We have 8 left, so if we did 2 minutes apiece, that's 16 minutes plus applause time, so it's 20 more minutes.
So if we cut the applause time out.
Good luck. So about 20 more minutes, probably. So it would mean that we could do more public comment time. We could hear the city manager's presentation. We would basically not have time for discussion.
Well,
So
to me, I would rather hear from him. Not that I have anything against
Nope.
him,
So
but the folks are here.
are you making a motion?
Motion that we continue until we have what, 8 remaining?
We have 8 remaining.
Let's hear from the 8.
Okay.
I
So,
second
motion on the
that.
floor. Second. Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of continuing public testimony? Okay. Motion carries. We will continue. Okay. So Christine Donahue, followed by Pat Hadley.
Hello, everyone. I am Christine Donahue, and I live in Ward 2. I've been a resident of Eugene since 1976. I am a retired public employee and a community volunteer. I'm here tonight to urge you to study very carefully and cautiously the importance of the services under consideration for possible reductions. And I ask you to look at existing funds and other ways to keep what we have now in place while you study the budget in more detail. This is a complex task that will require more time than the few weeks left before the new fiscal year starts on July 1st, just 5 weeks away. Eugene has lost a lot in recent years. Eugene has received state and national recognition for many years for services and innovations in local governance. Among these is the Eugene Public Library and its role of providing lifelong learning resources. The branches are critical to the residents, including children in those neighborhoods. Eugene's neighborhood program has efficiently, effectively, and creatively provided citizen involvement and collaboration mechanisms for more than 40 years. Last week, our very own Harlow Neighbors was named Neighborhood of the Year by Neighborhoods USA at its annual conference. The Harlow folks developed a unique human services project that is ongoing and may serve as a national model. The River Road and Santa Clara community organizations placed second in another category for community education and collaboration with local government units. Thousands of neighborhood volunteer hours go into projects for the benefit of our community every year. Another nationally recognized program in Eugene is Cahoots, which has done an awesome job for nearly 2 decades. And I hope you all remember what the acronym Cahoots stands for: Crisis Assistance, Helping Out on the Streets. Thank you for listening and also for your service to the community.
Thank you. Pat Hadley, followed by David Fryfield. Pat Hadley here? No? Okay. Wait, no? Okay, so David Fryfield, followed by Ray Brown.
That name I'll take. David Fryfield, Ward 1. I am president of Emerald Aquatics, a team based at Echo Hollow Pool. Our members range from age 7 to age 80 years young. We are strong advocates for the value of aquatics programs as a means to lifelong fitness, health, and quality of life. And I'm here to support our friends from Team Eugene and the other patrons of Sheldon Pool. Sheldon Pool serves people of all ages, sizes, abilities, people of limited mobility who participate in water-based recreation and physical activity, some of whom have no alternative, in addition to the many other services which have been listed, and I won't repeat those. Some of you know that I have a day job as an oncologist at the Willamette Valley Cancer Institute, and I tend to look at everything through oncologist eyes. So did you know that inactivity is related to cancer? In 2011, the American Institute for Cancer Research estimated that each year 43,000 cases of colon cancer and 49,000 cases of breast cancer in this country result from inactivity. Worldwide, inactivity causes as many deaths per year as smoking. Inactivity is also related to obesity. Obesity rates in Oregon rose from 13.6% in 1995 to 25.4% in 2010. And even among obese people, those who are active have lower rates of chronic illness and mortality than normal weight people who are sedentary. We need more recreation opportunities, not less. As you balance the needs with the available resources, I would ask that you consider the full breadth of services that aquatics programs and pools provide, the importance of those broad services to health and quality of life in the community, and the alternatives or lack of alternatives for those 350 people who currently pass through the doors of Sheldon Pool each day. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray Brown, followed by Mark Gillum.
Hello. City Manager Reese, Mayor Piercy, councilors, and Budget Committee members. My name is Ray Brown. I'm a captain with the Eugene Fire Department, and I serve as Secretary-Treasurer for Eugene Firefighters Local 851. I've been assigned to Station 2 for over 4 years. The men and women in public safety provide a gateway to essential social services critical to the survival for many of the most needy members of our community. Engine 2, Cahoots, and law enforcement are all more than just another social service. They are the first access point for many of the residents for our community. A typical call for Engine 2 at 4 a.m. may be to the Mission, Buckley House, or an area payphone. The people we help are often cold and wet, sometimes mentally unstable, assault victims, or simply unable to deal with the challenges of life without consistent, reliable food, shelter, and safety. On Engine 2, we triage our patients to get them the proper assistance for their situation. This may include medical treatment and transport to an emergency room, or simply helping someone to find a safe, dry place for the remainder of the night. We assist people in getting from their place of crisis to the help they need to such resources such as the Mission, Buckley House, or the Johnson Unit. Our partners at Cahoots are critical to providing the crisis intervention, mental health counseling, and transportation for those in need of assistance. Engine 2 and Cahoots are a vital link in services during the night when most people are at home resting comfortably in bed. Without these services, members of our community will experience increased suffering. Cahoots and Engine 2 help people access the life-saving services they need and are an essential service affecting the livability of our community. I urge you to maintain funding at its current levels for Engine 2 and Cahoots. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark Gillum, followed by Tom Mulhern.
Well, good evening, and thanks for extending the time. I appreciate that. With all due respect to city staff, I think we have a manufactured crisis here. Let me just go over some numbers. In 2011, there was $5.1 million more revenue than budgeted. In 2012, $4.7 million more revenue than budgeted. In 2013, at the end of the 12-year end, there is $43 million in reserve. We have a $6 million plus or minus budget gap and a $540 million budget. A lot of numbers. If we divide all those by 5 million, here's what we have. Basically, we have a 100 and a 1, and that's our budget, what we need. We have $8 over here, and that's our current reserve. What the city manager is saying is that we don't have enough money for this $1, so we have to take that $1 away. But historically, that $1 has come back to us in revenue every year. So what we're arguing about is something that doesn't exist. Now, if that $1 doesn't come back, then we just take this $1 away from that $8, and we still have $7 in reserves. I think that's an ample amount. What Eugene historically does is make a big deal out of little things. This is really a little thing. All of these programs that have been talked about tonight, from the Sheldon Pool that my son swims at to the library that my daughter uses, can be preserved if we just think carefully about how to spend our money. And we have the resources there, and historically we've had the resources there. So I think what we need to do is step away from the manufactured crisis and use the resources that we already have. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. We won't get through if we have applause each time. So thank you very much. Tom Mulhern, followed by Paul Conti.
Well, thank you for doing a thankless task. I'm Tom Mulhern, Executive Director of Catholic Community Services of Lane County. And the proposed 70% reduction in City of Eugene funding for the Human Services Commission, 70% is not belt tightening. That's a major shift in funding policy, and one that I would pose goes against stated budget goals. In our own case, our Community Service Center on West 6th we would be looking at going from 5 days a week of service to 3 days a week of service, and going from 3 days of food distribution each week to 2 days of food distribution. Now, we serve close to 10,000 unduplicated persons a year at that center, 5,500 households, and a 20 to 25% reduction in those numbers would be a huge impact in terms of people getting services in this community. So I urge you to look for alternatives and wish you the best.
Thank you very much. Paul Conti, followed by Jan Aho.
Good evening. My name is Paul Conti. I live in Ward 1, and with apologies to David Letterman, I'm going to roll right into an abbreviated version of the top 10 reasons to support the city manager's proposed cuts in city services. Number 10, city officials can demonstrate they're not in cahoots with radical elements seeking to provide crisis intervention that reduces the need for city police resources. Number 9, by reducing funding for jail beds, city officials could teach that uppity Lane County sheriff not to make the city manager look bad by getting voters to pass a tax increase after 9 previous rejections of county levies while the city gets trounced 2-1. Number 8, the proposed cuts would boost the local economy by increasing demand for locally produced "I'm just a pesky voter" t-shirt. Number 7, by eliminating the neighborhood services program, city staff would then be able to run public planning processes much more efficiently, free from interference by impacted neighborhood residents. Number 6, closing branch libraries and cutting hours would promote the quality educational experience that kids get from spending more time playing video games. Skipping to number 2, by eliminating the St. Vincent de Paul car camping contract, the mayor and city manager and councilors who support the city manager's proposed cuts would have a wonderful opportunity to express "we care" by hosting displaced campers in their own backyards. And finally, the number 1 reason to support the city manager's proposed service cuts: the council could provide just the kind of resume experience that would qualify Mr. Reese for the city manager position that's currently open in the town of Damascus. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan Aho is our final speaker.
Thank you. My name is Jan Aho. I'm the Executive Director of ProBucks Center, a member of the Community Action Advisory Committee for HSN and liaison to that committee. I really can't say anything more in addition to everything that has already been said regarding the significant cuts that this budget proposes to human services here in Eugene. What I see is it ripping asunder our community. When everybody has said the cuts have been tearing things apart, it's not an exaggeration. And so I just urge you to look deeply into the budget, to give it time, and to find a better solution than is before you right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I want to thank all the members of the public who came tonight and shared with us your thoughts. This is an enormously valuable part of the process. Thank you for all of you for your time tonight. Thank you very much. Okay. So the next thing on our agenda is a presentation from the city manager and I believe Sue from finance about the facility reserve. Is that what it's called? Facility reserves. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's been a lot of interest on questions about the city's funding for facilities and in general, and City Hall in particular. So I'm going to provide an overview of several of those topics. I wanted to start out with our policy framework because that's really how we go about determining how to fund our services, particularly, and these are the policies related on the capital side. We have a policy that relates to operating on capital budgets, saying that we will have sufficient funding to pay for maintenance or enhancement of fixed assets that support our services. We have a policy that says we'll develop and fund replacement accounts for our fixed assets. We have a marginal beginning working capital policy that says that the general capital projects fund is one of the highest uses for marginal beginning working capital. And that has been reinforced by the Budget Committee, who has recommended that the council consider $900,000, the first $900,000 to come from marginal beginning working capital to go towards facility maintenance. We have a policy around dedicated revenues for capital projects. We have a non-recurring revenue policy that says that capital projects are one of the types of expenditures that are appropriate to be funded from non-recurring revenues. And we also have the capital improvement program, which sets out how we plan for our capital improvements over a multiple year period of time. And we have a city's physical asset policy that says we'll maintain a current inventory and we'll provide maintenance costs for those assets. So all those are the background for how we approach funding for our facilities. I'm giving you an overview of the different kinds of facility funding that we have, because I think some of the questions that we've been getting relate to different parts of our facility funding, and I just wanted to be clear about some of those different pieces. So this is a diagram that shows how we fund our facilities, what kind of expenditures, where the money comes from. Basically, we have three kinds of activities in our facility fund. We have the operations and maintenance portion, we have general capital preservation, and then we have new construction and upgrades. So operations and maintenance is funded mainly through department charges, and that goes into our Fund 618. Those rates are used to pay for things like custodial services, pool operations, energy management, access control, and so on. From FY10 through FY13, our facility rates have gone down 15% overall, and they'll go down even further in the proposed budget as a result of closure of Sheldon Pool and the shifting of some of the funding from the general fund to well, that doesn't reduce the funding, never mind. So this is one of the ways we've been able to keep the general fund cost curve from increasing as much over the past few years. And we've been able to do this by doing things like investing in energy efficiencies, reducing positions, and looking for other kinds of efficiencies. On the capital preservation side, that's the public buildings and facilities funding that you see in your capital improvement program. The purpose of this funding is to adequately maintain our assets so that we don't wind up paying more money in the future in order to do more expensive rehabilitation or replacement. So funding for these projects comes mostly from the general fund transfer, and there's a lot of good information about this part of the budget in your capital improvement program. So if you haven't read that piece, I would recommend that you do that. So the Budget Committee did adopt a general capital budget strategy in FY01, and they set a base capital transfer at $1.7 million per year and said that that should increase by $100,000 each succeeding year. So the FY14 amount in the proposed budget is $2.7 million. The Budget Committee strategy also called for continued dedication of that additional $900,000 from marginal beginning working capital, and that relates back to the policy that I talked about earlier. Funding for facility maintenance and preservation totals about 1.3% of the value of our general fund buildings, which falls short of what's considered to be adequate to preserve our facilities. The amount recommended is between 2 to 4% of the asset value each year, which leaves us with a gap of over $2 million per year. So when John talks about getting us to a sustainable budget, this is one of those key places where we are not putting enough money into our funding in order to actually adequately maintain those buildings. And then finally is the new construction and upgrade section. And City Hall is the most significant project that we're talking about in that category, so I'll go on into more detail on that in a second. So for the City Hall project, we basically have 3 funds where activity is occurring related to that project. So we've been accumulating dollars over a period of years, and that's in the facility replacement fund or the facility reserve fund, Fund 614. According to accounting rules, we can't accumulate money for a capital project that isn't imminent in a capital projects fund, which is why we have a separate fund for the resource accumulation. Once council has approved a capital project, an active capital project, then they direct funding for that project by approving a budget to transfer money into the City Hall Complex Fund, which is Fund 323. That's where all of the dollars on a particular capital project like City Hall would be spent. And then one of the categories of spending for a capital project is the facilities staff that manage the project. So Mike Penwell for the City Hall project is an example. Those project manager time are budgeted in our Facilities Professional Services Fund, Fund 635, and then as they do work on any particular capital project, that gets billed out to that project. So all of that's done on a reimbursement basis. So for City Hall, to the extent Mike's spending time on an active capital project, his time would be billed to that fund. The Facilities Professional Services Fund would receive that funding to pay his salary on a reimbursement basis. So now moving on to more specifics about the City Hall plan. Council last discussed this in January, and the building is now, as you can see, vacant pending rebuilding, and it's fenced off for security reasons. So back in January, Council gave direction to move forward with a rebuild design as we show in this slide. You can see that one of the things that they talked about in January was that the staff would be requesting $750,000 to complete the design phase of the work. And the plan is to bring that back to supplemental budget that's coming to Council in June. Architect selection's underway. You've probably read about that in the paper. And we've got a budget of $15 million for this project, although I will say not all of that money has been identified yet. There's about $8.6 million total saved up for this project. $7.9 million is budgeted in the facility reserve in FY14, plus the $750,000 that will be requested on supplemental budget, so total of $8.6 million. The remainder of the project budget will have to be identified and allocated by the council in the future, and there are several potential sources of funding for that. We could use telecom funds for building costs that have a nexus with telecommunications. We could use a portion of the $900,000 general capital transfer that occurs on supplemental budget each year, and in fact, council did that this year. They dedicated $500,000 of that to the City Hall project. Sale of assets if we are able to sell any, and then we would also look for other opportunities like grants or energy incentives and so on to help us get to that $15 million budget. Timeline, the project is scheduled to be completed by the end of 2015. So getting back to the facility reserve, which is the main place where we save up for these dollars. Creation of the facility reserve occurred in 2001, and it's consistent with all of those policies that are laid out at the beginning of this presentation. You know, replacement account, marginal beginning working capital, use of non-recurring revenues, and so on. We began to set aside dollars in 2001 with the intention of doing a large project, partially funded with the facility reserve, partially funded with bonds, but that project concept has, changed over time for a number of reasons. But we have been able to complete a number of projects, which I'll just go through quickly in a minute. Our current intention is to fund a scaled-back design without asking voters for additional dollars, but the project would allow for expansion in the future, but we don't have a particular plan or particular budget or particular timing set out for that yet. Okay, and this is just a reminder that we've had 4 bond measures related to City Hall over the past dozen years. 3 of them have failed. One of them passed, which was the bond measure to pay for the downtown fire station, which is at 13th and Willamette. So where have the facility reserve funds come from? Well, I included in your packet an explanation, a memo, and answers to some specific questions that George Brown had asked. So hopefully you had a chance to read that. But I just want to give a brief overview here. Most of the funding has come from one-time allocations that were made by the council. The biggest single addition to the fund was money that we received from the settlement of a telecommunications lawsuit in 2005. That was about $15 million. The next largest deposit was a little over $7 million placed in the fund in 2001 from unanticipated eWeb contributions in lieu of tax. And then there were also other one-time dollars like residual assets from the assessment bond fund, sale of surplus property, and some other miscellaneous items. In FY 03 through 09, there was an annual charge in the budget for any city function that was located in a downtown office space, and that was called the capitalization component of the facility charge. In FY09, which was the last year that charge was in place, $841,000 went into the facility reserve from that purpose, both from general fund and non-general fund functions. That charge was discontinued in FY10 as a budget saving measure. In FY12 and 13, the council's directed a total of $1.5 million be placed in the reserve, with $500,000 each year from marginal beginning working capital, and then the $500,000 that was redirected from the $900,000 general capital transfer. So here's what it looks like if you want to see the numbers, basically, the year-by-year detail of the activity and the balances. There's no ongoing money that's being deposited into this fund. And you can see that from this representation. This also shows the $750,000 that will be requested on supplemental budget in June for City Hall planning. And then there's the Country Club Road lease revenues and expenses, which was related to when we bought 300 Country Club Road, and the city was the landlord for tenants for a period of time before we started construction. So that's just what that item is. There's no activity proposed in FY14 at all, so it's just proposed a carryover balance from FY13. So how have the monies been used, the monies that have gone into the fund over time? There have been a number of City Hall related projects that have been funded from facility reserve funds, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But I wanted to point out that there were also some other things that these facility reserve funds have been used for. A total of $6.5 million was dedicated to street maintenance projects out of the facility reserve. There was $900,000 used in FY04 to fill a general fund budget gap. And then there were also some other miscellaneous expenses, police staffing study, homeless prevention services, and Lark's master plan funding that came out of this reserve. So in terms of progress to date, here are a number of projects that have happened starting back in 2001 in terms of replacing City Hall basically in pieces. In 2001, we moved the 911 center. 2004, property and forensics. 2005, the fire station. And 2012 was really the year when the balance of services came out of City Hall. The steam system decommissioning was the big driver for getting out at that particular moment. And police headquarters, Muni Court, HR and risk, and CMO all moved out in 2012. There were 3 of these projects used facility reserve funds. The rest of them were paid for with other dollars. And then I was just going to go through really quickly. You may not remember all of these things, but the police forensics evidence and property control unit was in the basement of City Hall. Now it has this building North Garfield. The downtown fire station, most of this was paid for with the bond measure, but there were some dollars taken out of the facility reserve to pay for the costs that were not eligible for bond funding. Police headquarters, 300 Country Club Road. Municipal court, not paid for with facility reserve, but one of the pieces of City Hall that we've moved to a different location. City manager's office in the public service building. HR and risk services now in the Woolworth building. And that's it. Did I miss anything?
No, thank you.
Okay.
So let's take about 15 minutes for questions, if anybody has any.
This is in reference to the
In reference to the presentation, correct. So, you want to get in the queue? So. Councilor Zelenka, you were first, and if anyone else wants.
So thanks. Also included is the facility reserve background information. It was in our packet and was emailed to us. So there's been a lot of numbers floating around about how much facilities reserve we have, and I've even heard as high as $43 million today, which is a surprise to me. So other than the $7.9 million in the facility reserve, what other reserves do we have that are usable, that aren't legally required to be reserved for some specific purpose that we could use for general fund services? You might have to get back to me on that one. Yeah. The other one I have for you is, so when I do the math, the major deposits in the facility reserve, I take it these aren't the total accounting for every deposit into the facility reserve, because they add up to $33.5 million, and then the expenditures add up to about $29.5 million, so there's about $4 million.
Which slide are you referring to?
I'm referring to
this. Oh, the memo.
Referring
Okay.
to the memo.
Yeah.
Which I think basically captures the one-time dollar contributions and not some of the funding mechanisms that were put in place for a period of time.
Right, so that totals $33.5 million.
Yeah.
And then the expenditures total $29.5 million, which leaves a net of 4, but we have almost 8. So there's $4 million missing in this description. If you could tell me where that comes from, that would be good.
We will get that for you.
So Taylor.
I'd like to know how much rent we're paying on all of these, in all of these different locations.
On the city lease office space?
Yes.
Yep, we'll get that for you.
City managers, all of these different spaces that are HR, all together, individually and together, how much rent are we?
We'll do that.
Thanks.
I have a question. Question in regard to the $1 million fund. I think it was for the tax appeal reserve. There's a quick explanation on that, or you can provide more information on that. I'd be interested.
Okay.
Are you able to answer that now, Sue? That $1 million on the tax appeal? Or?
If we could answer it on Thursday, that would be great.
Okay.
So Councilor Zelenka and then Jill.
So additional piece of information from Councilor Taylor. So some of those leases are long-term leases, so I'd like to know the term of them. We can't break them, so some of them are longer term. And I guess I wanted to be a little bit clearer about what I was talking about before. There's some people have said there's an enormous amount of money sitting in reserves that we can use for city services, up to $43 million, which is news to me. And then today we heard that we have $7 million in this fund plus BFB, So just want to get clear about the accounting of all of our reserves, of which ones we can legally use and what their purposes are, so that we can look at that in a more holistic fashion.
So the $43 million may be what folks look at when they look at our CAFR and our general fund.
What's CAFR?
Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So the net assets in our general fund. but I can.
But that doesn't mean that they're available to be used as
Correct.
fund
Right.
services.
Correct.
Yes, that would be a
So
helpful explanation.
why not, would be a question.
Right.
Are you finished? Are you done? Okay, great. Jill?
So you said there's $8.6 million right now in reserve for City Hall?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I guess I'm confused. So the facility reserve is 7.9. Are those in different funds?
No. So there's 8.6 total.
Okay.
7.9 is what's budgeted in FY14.
Got it.
After taking into account $750,000 that will be presented to council on supplemental budget in June to pay for the design and planning costs for City Hall. So 8.6 million total, 7.9 million available after the supplemental budget.
Okay. And so if the council was to, let's say, vote again and went back to their original intention and put the City Hall out to the voters for a bond, how much would there be money then, and so that's for the total amount. So would there be money then, the 7.9 million, would that be available, the total amount, to go back into the general fund?
Well, that would be a decision. Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
Okay. It would be a decision that would be made at that time, assuming, based on what bond funding is approved and what funding is needed for the project. So we would have to take a look at that at that time, and a decision could be made at that time.
Okay, so basically, let's say it was 15, just hypotheticals, 15 million, okay, let's say would be the total project, and then the city council said, okay, let's, instead of saving the money, right, let's put it out for a bond. Then at that point, you could then tell us, for example, what the amount would be that could go back into the general fund. Essentially you're going to borrow money rather than save for it.
Everything that's currently in the facility reserve, 7.9 plus that 750, which actually hasn't been appropriated yet. So if the community approved a bond measure for the entire cost of City Hall, whatever that is, that would then free up that 7.9 plus $750,000 to be reappropriated, or to be appropriated into the general fund for whatever the council chooses to buy with that money.
If that's one-time funding, right? So
Yeah,
it's not an ongoing amount.
Okay, so one more question. So, I'm not sure if this is possible, but would it be possible for the budget committee to basically, propose to the council that they consider putting that out for a bond, and then if the citizens approve the bond, then vote to have that money put back into the general fund to cover the services? Is that something that could be done by the budget committee?
I would think so. I think the budget committee can recommend probably any or all of that to the council, is my suspicion. So, yes.
If then kind of approach, right?
As a recommendation?
Yes, a recommendation.
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you.
So I put myself into the queue, and I just had a quick question. So a couple of these things, it looks like a lot of these things were planned and formulated, and the last time they were looked at was in '01. So some of these issues about what the fund should be to adequately maintain buildings, there was a policy that was set in '01, and kind of looks like some of this planning around City Hall and facilities started back then. Is that partly an outgrowth of these couple failed bond measures where, I don't know if anybody has the history, but maybe a council at that point said, gosh, if a couple bond measures have failed, we need another strategy to start building funding for preserving facilities and future needs? Do you know?
I don't remember all of the specific timing. I wasn't in this role at that point, but I don't know if anybody else around the table remembers that. I'm assuming that was the case in developing a strategy, knowing that we needed to get out of City Hall at some point with the steam conversion and all of the other things that were moving forward.
And that bond measures had not, at that point, at least been successful. Okay, thank you. And then, Councilor Brown?
Well, I just want to pick up on something that Jill said. Council probably at any time could just say, hey, let's just take all this money out. We don't have to have a bond measure fail to do this, or pass to do this. I think council has the full authority to say, if we decide to, we can take part of this money out to fund these services that are threatened. And it's not really related to a bond measure, or what we could do that. We have that option. But my question is, I'm looking at page 3, and there it says if council chooses any of the options above regarding City Hall, staff will be requesting $750,000 for the design phase. Where would that money come from?
From the facility reserve.
It would come from the facility reserve. Sure.
Any other questions, Councilor Zelenka? And then Councilor Pulling, no, you were next. I'm sorry, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I don't really have a question as a response to the suggestion Joe made. I appreciate creative thinking, but in looking at our track record on bond measures for City Hall and the idea of, well, if the voters do this, we'll do that, which we just saw didn't work, I'm really against putting out something like a bond measure for the City Hall at this point. And I would submit that if we hadn't been using the facility reserve funds for other things other than the facilities, we would be building a City Hall by now based on our scaled back budget. So I think it's a matter of being fiscally responsible and trying to come up with a sustainable budget. But I do appreciate the fact that at least, you know, we're coming up with some kind of ideas, but I just don't think that one will fly with the voters right now.
So, Councilor Pulling?
No, sorry.
Oh, Councilor Zelenka, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of begs the question of what is City Hall. To me, City Hall was all the functions that were in there, and systematically what we've done is moved each one out and paid for it or built it or leased spaces for the long term, like the court, like the police, like the fire, like HR and risk services, and then finally the last piece was the city managers. The only thing left of City Hall is the council chambers and the city manager's office and the mayor's office and maybe a community meeting room like this, and that's what that $15 million would build. I think the only thing we actually, when you look at this list, George, the only thing we didn't spend for those kinds of expenditures was the Lane County revenue swap, which is actually Councilor Bettman's idea, where we in 2009, where we swapped $4.5 million of our facilities reserve for road fund money and reduced our facilities reserve so that Lane County could spend on their general fund, which I helped with that and I thought was a great idea and still contend it was. So other than that, we've spent it on things that were mostly, except for a few things, mostly related to getting out of that City Hall mode. Just to clarify, so if we were to do a bond for City Hall and it were approved, that would increase people's taxes and that would pay the debt service. So the debt service wouldn't come out of general fund, it would come out of that increased increased property taxes.
Yes.
Correct.
What would a $15 million bond
Yeah, good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but we can give you an
cost the average person?
So a $170 million bond for 4J just cost the average homeowner, it was 24 cents on $1,000 of assessed property value. So $42 a year for $170 million.
That's a different tax base.
True, but just, you know.
Very similar.
Yeah.
You could get back to us on what that would cost.
So we have Councilor Brown, and then Councilor Pulling, and then we're going to do a time check.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is more of a comment than anything else, I guess. You know, if there's trust with the voters, if they trust us, they will pass bond measures. I mean, they did so for the 13th and Willamette Fire Station. That was mostly funded by a bond. Voters approved that. They recently approved $170 million for 4J. They approved a big property tax levy for the jail. And a few years back, what was it, $80 million for LCC to fix up their buildings. And so it's not that. It's I think maybe there's some trust. It might be more of a trust issue. We can, if in fact trust has been lost, I feel we can regain it by making sensible decisions with this big problem that we're facing now. I mean, I'm looking on page 4, it says facility reserve purpose. The current intention is to rebuild City Hall with a scaled-back detail without asking voters for additional dollars. But the policy of transferring, our policy of transferring money from the general fund into this fund so that we don't ask for additional dollars has actually led us to ask for additional dollars from the public because we can't fund the basic services. So we ask them for extra dollars via city service fee. So, that didn't work. It's a noble idea, but it didn't seem like it worked because, in fact, we had to go out and ask people for more. I mean, that was one of the strategy, and people didn't like that solution. So, we have to think of something else, and I think we're back to a bond measure, which means that this money could be used for differently served.
Thank you. Councilor Poling?
Well, again, I don't want to go back and forth with Alan on this, but there were some other monies from the facility reserve that was spent on other than facilities. 2 years in a row, we took $1 million and put it in the road fund. $900,000 was taken out in '04, surprisingly enough, to help fill a budget gap in the general fund. What we did is in that year, we just kicked the can a little bit down the road to try to balance the general fund. And then the miscellaneous other ones, there were only 3 listed. I'm sure there were more. So, there's more money than it appears on the surface that was used for other than facility type expenditures.
But most.
But still,
So we have 2 more people in the queue, and then I do want to make sure we at least have a few minutes to wrap up and focus on our next steps going forward, since we have only a few more meetings. So Mark is in the queue, and then Councilor Taylor. So how about we, were you and Bob too? Okay. So if we can just kind of keep those couple comments brief, and then we'll try to wrap up in the last few minutes.
And I don't know exactly where we are on the agenda, if we're still asking questions or having more of a discussion, but I have a little of both, so I'll just go for it. But one is I wanted to mention an idea that Councilor Clark put out in his email from earlier today, and it was intriguing to me in relation to the lapse fund idea that he put forward in that email, talking about a 2% reduction citywide in departments. And so I wonder if that's already going to be looked at or presented to us, or that more information can be brought back to us on that idea. He had it combined with a couple other things, but that in particular stood out to me as something that sounded interesting. And then also, I can't even read my own handwriting now. Oh, in December, we've heard a number of times now that typically in the supplemental budget in December, revenue comes back higher than expected. And I know in a graph you showed last time, Sue, last Thursday, that there was the budgeted and then actual numbers that seemed to coincide for the most part. You mentioned one year that was significantly different, I think, because of the Hynix fee or something like that. So I'm wondering more about that too. Is it fairly typical for in December to have more revenue come in, and could we get more information on that?
Sure. So that's a request for more information.
Right. And so my brief comment then too is we've already dived into this real detailed discussion about City Hall one-time funding and using it to fund services. And for me, bigger picture, kind of zooming back out a little bit, it's that there's still this ongoing $6 million gap that's been identified, and that's not going to be fixed by using one-time money wherever it comes from. And Council Poling mentioned kicking the can down the road a little bit, and I felt we were doing that last year, and I would hate to see us do that again this year.
Right, which is what I want us to circle back around to at the end of the conversation. So, Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. I wonder how much, I don't know that anybody can answer this, but I wonder how much money we have saved unwisely by not doing maintenance on City Hall. For many, many years now, we have not done the things that anyone would do on their home or on any building that they care about. And this building does belong to the public. We have neglected it deliberately for many years. And I think it's high time we've gotten to the point now where we're out of it, and the city does deserve a City Hall. But I don't know if anyone could come up with how much we've saved. I know that on my small house, I've spent a great deal of money just maintaining it. When you think of this big building, if we had done what we should have done, there would be enough to build a city hall, maybe.
Councilor Taylor, if I might answer that slightly, I don't know what the dollar amount would be, but what happened when we decided to disinvest in City Hall? Those funds that we would have split between City Hall and all the other city assets that we maintain was redirected into preserving the other assets that we have. So we were able to do more at other sites because of the available dollars and resources that were available. And so they didn't go into another fund, and it wasn't that they were just not used. They were actually used specifically for other capital work.
I know they were used, but we should have been doing things to City Hall, in my opinion. I know it was council majority that decided not to because they plan to replace City Hall. Thank you.
I guess I have a couple things. Looking at the bond measures, it's been 9 years since the city has put forth a bond measure. I think what Councilor Poling has said comes true. I think a lot of it is a trust issue. I think it also comes down to a value issue of what you're asking for. Obviously, the voters in our community were more than willing to pass 2 bond measures in this last election while turning down the service fee. On the facility reserve accounts, I guess this is just an inquiry for information on if any of those funds have been used or were used for the acquisition of the police headquarters on Country Club Road. Any of those dollars that were used then for the upgrades, for the roof repair, the HVAC system, and you know, where were those funds drawn from? And I'll hold comments for later.
Bob,
Yes.
if I could, the money that was spent for 300 Country Club did come out of the facility reserve fund, and so that encompassed a lot of the work that you're referring to in terms of roof repair, HVAC, and things like that.
So I know that you added yourself to the queue, Councilor Pryor, so I don't want to ignore that. However, I want us to talk just briefly, if we may, about how we're going to move forward. So I had made a couple comments at the beginning about the need for us to kind of figure out how we are going to manage through the rest of our work, especially given the fact that there's not been a kind of group discussion around the first question about reserves and one-time funding for ongoing expenses, which will then kind of frame, I think, in a lot of ways, our ability to look at the other list of services and proposals that are in the city manager's budget. So I had put forth a possibility of kind of looking at using some kind of available one-time dollars to fund for an extended period of time, such that we would push out our work time to allow us to do some more in-depth work. And I just wanted to see if there's any initial thoughts about that, but also in terms of looking forward to Thursday. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of public comment. We want to leave a lot of time for that. And either way, I would like to make a motion that we add a meeting to next Monday, June 3rd, because I think either way, we're probably going to need it. So I don't know if anyone...
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So look at your calendars, and we can move on that motion first, and if we decide that that's available, that gives us a little more time on Thursday perhaps to talk about some of these issues around how we want to move forward with reserves and other things. Yes?
And I'm assuming that's something that you checked with finance staff about in terms of their schedules.
They don't love it, but they're on board. Nobody loves it, right? So, yes, Councilor Brown. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to speak to the motion. We might need more than one meeting. We might need 2 or 3 meetings. What I would propose is, I'll accept the motion, but I think we'll have to have more meetings. I just don't think, tonight we really haven't had any discussion.
Right. My understanding is we have to be done by June 5th. And if that's correct, then really we only have
Are we obligated to be done by June So there can be a public hearing and an action.
Right. Therefore, June 3rd is really the only additional meeting we can
Okay, yeah,
add.
that won't be, obviously, that won't be enough time for a thorough discussion. So really, what I think where, our choices are, we could, my ideal thing would be to have several extra meetings and look at the proposed cuts in more detail and think of trimming back areas and maybe cut one or two programs entirely, but also, that the thought of trimming the pools, the parks, the park restrooms, the library, the human service, to me, that's unthinkable.
Right, and so I think that was my original thought at the very beginning of the meeting, is do we need to go beyond just this June 5th date so that we can do just that? So I see a couple.
Yeah, but I like to finish my thought.
Yes, sorry.
I agree with you. And so what I think is because of the lack of time, we're kind of going to be in an either-or position. And so what I would recommend is just take all the money that we need out of the facility reserve, have our discussion, whatever we can about trimming, but take the money out of the facility reserve and fully fund everything that we've decided not to cut out entirely. And then we can't possibly do a detailed discussion between now and July 1st. So the deep look's going to have to come next year. So we're not in the same position this time next year. We'll have to start our real budget committee meetings in January, and hold more of them, more in depth, and take a deep look. But we can't do that between now and June 5th.
June 5th, yeah.
We can't. We just simply can't.
So I think we would have to have that, you bring that potentially as a motion then?
Well, yeah,
Yeah, that would be, okay, great, okay.
But I want to have more discussion first. So
Yes.
We don't have time to have.
And unfortunately tonight especially we don't, because we have to have a hard stop at 7:15. So Councilor Taylor.
I would prefer, rather than having another meeting now, which I don't think will accomplish anything, I like Laura's suggestion of I would not take any money out of facilities reserve. We've waited way too long to do something about City Hall. We take it out of the reserve for revenue shortfall. And I liked the idea of the 6-month, and then have some intense meetings looking at where can we find more revenue and what should we really cut and take more time for it. But I don't see any purpose to an extra meeting Monday night. It would just be more of the same.
Okay, so do we need a counter motion then?
I move to substitute your motion to. Yes, there is.
Have another meeting.
There's a motion for another meeting.
Right, so I made a motion, so I think we probably need to vote on my motion and then have you substitute an alternative motion, assuming mine does not pass. So I have a motion on the floor. I think it was seconded. Oh, sorry, Councilor Zink, I apologize.
I thought your original idea, which is a good one, so if you think we have a $5.3 million hole we had to fill, half a year would be about $2.5 million, $2.6 million. And we got a gift from the legislature of $1.1 million on the PERS. And then if we sell that property to the shed, that's another $800,000. So we're almost at $2 million. Then we could take out a revenue shortfall another $500,000 or $600,000, and then you're at about $2.5 million. And I agree, taking it out of the facility reserve is not the right place. So that kind of motion to then give us 6 months to do a detailed analysis about what we want to do and talk about facilities reserves, policies.
Point of order.
Tax.
That's not the motion on the floor.
Thank you.
And also
So
other
you're
kinds
right.
of funds.
I'm sorry, Councilor Zelenka. So I think you're right that he's saying that you're not speaking to the motion on the floor, but to the alternative. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And I think you were speaking sort of to my motion in terms of saying I like something else better. So, okay, we're almost out of time. So, yeah, but did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Can we call the question?
Let's call the question, and then I think we need to have more of this conversation, obviously, on Thursday, and that's what we'll prepare for, because this is exactly what we need to talk about. Okay, so let's call the question.
Could you repeat the motion?
So my motion was to have an additional meeting on Monday evening, was my original motion. So all those in favor? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. And all those opposed? 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it appears that we'll plan to have another meeting on Monday. In the meantime, I believe on Thursday, what I would like to propose is that we will have a lot of public comment, because I think we need to hear from the public, and that's been very valuable, and then go further into this conversation about how do we want to proceed next, because that's really what's critical for us to decide.
We'll need to stick to a pretty strict schedule, time schedule, and not
Yeah.
stretch it out.
Yes, agreed.
Yep, I agree.
Move to adjourn.
It won't be public testimony meetings. Public can appear. But it won't be a testimony meeting on Monday.
He's asking if there'll be public.
Monday, no, right, but Thursday will be, right. So, there was a move to adjourn. Is there a second? Okay, adjourn, thank you.
There you have it.